Welcome to the Craft of Coaching podcast, where we dive into what it truly takes to become a skilled, confident life coach. I'm your host, Kate, head of the CLCC or Credentialed Life Coach Collective, an ICF accredited Level 1 coach training program. We combine courage, coaching, and community to offer you more than just a training program, but a life-changing experience where you use your own personal transformation as the learning ground for supporting your clients. On this podcast, we explore how you can use coaching skills to support your clients or expand your own growth, all grounded in evidence-based coaching practices. Learn more about our program and get free resources for becoming a life coach at teamclcc.com. And now, here's today's episode. All right, let's get into the weeds of a topic that I think comes up sometimes when people are worried about ethical overreach and just in general, how to talk about coaching and what it is. And that is, what is the difference between coaching and mentoring and therapy? And so first, I'm going to start by just giving the definition or explanation of what coaching is. We talk about this a lot in the Certified Life Coach Collective or CLCC program because we train coaches, and so we're defining these sorts of things for coaches, and we're giving marketing training as well on how do you talk about what you do. And so as we start to get into some of these definitions, there's the ICF definition of coaching, and then there's a CLCC coach training program definition of coaching. And so first, I'm going to say what the ICF definition of coaching, that's the International Coaching Federation. So the ICF, or International Coaching Federation, defines coaching as, quote, partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. Totally valid definition of coaching. In the CLCC coach training program, we look at definitions and how to make them as accessible as possible. And so we define coaching as a client-led partnership between coach and client, where the coach supports the client to make focused shifts in their lives while normalizing feeling fear and uncertainty as part of the process and supporting the client to live authentically and be aligned with who they truly are. And this is a definition of coaching that, frankly, in CLCC, we have edited and revised over the years, refined. And the ICF definition of coaching has also been edited and revised over the years. So starting with a point where we define what coaching is important. And then also, I will just add that I tend to think that when we're in casual conversation with people and they ask, what is coaching anyway? You know, if you're a new or emerging coach and you're starting to tell people that you're coaching, and you go to a party or something like that, and someone says, well, what is coaching? Is it like therapy? And usually what they're getting at with that question, they understand that coaching and therapy have some parallels and even some overlap. Both modalities are, for instance, asking open-ended questions for client exploration and employing active listening and using skills like mirroring to reflect back to the client what they've said so that we can ensure understanding or notice patterns or stories, narratives. There's a lot of that overlap, but usually in casual conversation when people ask, what they're really getting at is, how are the two different? How do you know if you need one versus the other? And the example that I usually give in such cases is, well, the difference would be, let's say someone goes through a breakup, they're feeling a lot of grief, loss over the relationship. If they can't get out of bed, struggle to function at work, can't really stop crying, ruminating thoughts, think that they're never again going to find love, probably a better fit for therapy. If they are grieving, sadness, loss, work feels harder, they feel less motivated to do things, but they're still doing them anyway. There's a sense of, I've lost something really big here, and I understand that even though it might feel like I'll never find love again, the truth is this is a grieving process and I can heal. Probably a better fit for coaching. So I like to give a practical example when I explain the difference between the two, But nonetheless, I offer that to you today on this episode so that you can think about how you talk about coaching with people. So between coaching, mentoring, and therapy, the lines can get blurry, especially for new coaches who are showing up and going, I want to help, I want to do it right, and who might even find themselves in sessions where a client says something vulnerable or triggering and you're not sure what to do next, and you want to make sure you don't overstep a line. So if you care about coaching ethically, if you want your clients to trust you deeply, and you want a check-in of sorts to make sure you're not overstepping your role, let's get into it. So we need to talk about this because, by the way, this is not just a theoretical issue. Coaches today are working with clients who are stressed, anxious, burned out. I'm not talking about just burnout as in, oh my gosh, I'm so burned out. I'm talking about clinical burnout, processing trauma. I think these are all things that come with living in a more complicated post-pandemic world. So what happens when a client starts crying in a session? What happens when a client brings up a story from their past and it's about their trauma? If we are not clear about what coaching is and isn't, the risk is that we could do harm, we could cross boundaries, we could undermine the very trust we want to build, and of course, we might not be doing what's in the best interest of the client. So that's why we want to be so mindful of all of this. So coaching is not therapy. Coaching is not mentoring. They have differences. They have a different scope and responsibility. And I'm going to get into each one. So first, let's just define our terms. Coaching, a partnership, client-led. We ask questions. We help clients build awareness about their behavior, their patterns, take action, stay accountable. We don't give advice. We don't diagnose. And everyone agrees on this. And it would be so much easier for everyone if the Board of Behavioral Sciences in the United States, that's the licensing board, would get together with the ICF or some other large conglomerate organization, and everybody would hammer out these differences, and it would be like a published thing that everybody coordinated on. That would be great. So far, they haven't done that. If they have, and I am not aware of this, please let me know. Things change all the time between when I record something and lived live reality. Mentoring is more directional. A mentor will share their own experience to guide someone along a path they've walked before. The closest example to that would be workplace or career mentoring. And therapy involves diagnosing and treating mental health issues. It requires a license. It will often employ coaching-related tools like building awareness, taking action, staying accountable, but often will go more into the past, more into the psyche, and more into unresolved trauma. This does not mean that the past is solely the domain of therapy. This is a soapbox I've been on for quite some time because when I first started coaching, this is back in 2006. I know, I've been coaching forever, 20 years as of recording this, 20 years. So when I first started coaching 20 years ago, I'm just sitting here now thinking of the days. Oh, sweet Kate, way back then. There was a lot of talk about therapy's about the past, coaching is about the future. And then I would go into my sessions with clients and I would find that if we were never talking about the past, we were never unpacking patterns that were in the here and now present. Also, if I was only helping the client create some kind of compelling future and that was my sole focus, if coaching was only about the future, I had some clients who were very invested in chasing some future vision instead of attending to the here and now. And by the way, I don't say any of that as judgment. I myself did that. I myself could get caught in like just totally being focused on some future goal and not attending to what about being mindful and present in the here and now. The present can be a very uncomfortable place for someone to be. That is often why people want to recycle the stories of their past constantly or I'm not going to think about like what here now, but it's going to get better. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. And sometimes that can be delusional chasing, and sometimes that can be perfectionistic, overly identified with goal, overachiever burnout syndrome. So, coaching is a partnership, client-led. We're helping clients build awareness, take action, stay accountable. Mentoring, more directional, more, hey, I'm going to help you walk along this path that I myself have walked along. And therapy gets into treating and diagnosing and treating mental health issues. There's going to be more emphasis on the past, more emphasis on the psyche, more emphasis on helping with trauma, really more emphasis on helping people who are struggling to regulate emotion. Coaching is not a fit for someone who cannot regulate emotion. And when I say cannot regulate emotion, I'm talking about cannot stop crying, has uncontrollable rage, addictions that are stemming from unregulated emotion, unable to get out of bed because they're so sad. All of what I just described, that should be in the domain of therapy. Therapists get more treatment more experience navigating treatment of individuals who struggle with those areas. They have more resources. Now, here's where it gets really tricky. Many clients don't know the difference. So they come to coaches and they expect answers, advice, even healing. And that's when we as coaches have to stay rooted in our role. So let's get into some of the most common places where coaches cross the line without even realizing it. The first one is overly solution-focused, trying to fix someone's emotional pain. Of course, on some level, as a coach, you're hoping that the problem of someone's pain or what they're going through can be helped or fixed by coaching. But it's a mentality that the coach sometimes enters into of trying to fix someone's emotional pain as if the coach has all the answers. And if you just follow my advice, you will never struggle with this thing again. This is the realm of becoming a pseudo-therapist to clients, especially when they're in distress. Another way that coaches sometimes cross boundaries when they become that pseudo-therapist is, let's say that coach themselves had a past history with an eating disorder, with addiction, with some kind of diagnosable mental illness. And then the coach moves into, well, it's really common for people who have borderline personality disorder to ... It's really common for people who, when they're struggling in addiction to ... and then weaving in their own experience with that. And you have to remember that clients, especially if they're very distressed, if emotions are dysregulated, clients are going to ascribe some level of role power to the coach. It's just kind of implicit in the hierarchy of the relationship, or the ways that people apply hierarchies to relationships. There's going to be some level of an implied power differential where the client often will ascribe power to the coach. It might not be intentional. Coaches, you need to be aware that clients do that. You need to be aware that when you speak from a place of, well, this is very common in someone with the diagnosis of that power differential is implied and in the room. Even if you know yourself, even if you say to clients, no, there's no power differential, it's like, it's going to be implied. So we have to be very careful as coaches as to how we speak about coaching. And then last, another place where coaches commonly cross the line without realizing it is using tools or language that sound clinical or diagnostic. And this is something that can get really easy to accidentally slip into because so many different terms from psychology have wound their way into the general parlance, the general way that people talk about things. So for instance, narcissism. Narcissism is a personality disorder. It has specific diagnostic criteria that are in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, or DSM. And also, people talk about it all the time on social media. And people have been learning about narcissism and it as a personality disorder and it as a behavior pattern. And so one thing that I think we need to pay attention to as coaches is that sometimes we might talk about something like narcissism with a client, and the client might be unintentionally filtering our words as if we are speaking as therapists within the domain of therapy, talking about narcissism as a personality disorder. But as coaches, maybe you're talking about narcissism more colloquially, more as a set of behaviors that can sometimes be observed, or even as a pattern that shows up for someone in a particular context. So I get it. You want to help as a coach. And here's the thing. The best way to help your client is always going to be to stay in your lane. Because when you coach well, you create a space where your client finds their own wisdom. If the client wanted therapy, they would go to therapy. If the client wanted mentoring, they would be looking for mentoring. So coaching needs to stay within the container of a client-led partnership. You're asking questions, helping to build awareness, stay accountable, take action, recognize patterns, but you're not giving advice, you're not diagnosing, you're not saying here's how you should do it, you're not getting into diagnostic criteria even. That's how you stay ethical. Now, sometimes it's not you who crosses the line, it's the client. They say things like, you're better than my therapist. Or they ask you to weigh in on a mental health diagnosis. Or they start going into stories of really deep trauma, and you don't have the container or context yet for them to know, okay, is this trauma that is actively stimulating? Is this, how is this trauma impacting this person's life? Have they done any work on this trauma with a qualified mental health professional? Things like that. And there's a big difference also with coaching between being trauma informed, which I think every coach should be trauma informed, versus trying to fix trauma, diagnose trauma, things like that. So what do you do in those moments? Well, first, you stay grounded. The more you can practice as a coach, understanding what coaching is and regulating yourself, which is, one of the ICF core competencies is what is your coaching presence? Stay grounded, draw in that coaching presence. Next, you affirm what the person is feeling, but without trying to fix it. You essentially are gently reinforcing the role of the coaching container. So for instance, you might say something like, what you're sharing is really important. It sounds like it has been a lot to walk through. I want to stay within the scope of coaching while also honoring how big this is for you. What would feel helpful to look at? Or how would it feel helpful to respond to this now in your life today? So again, if you want to rewind the tape here, rewind the tape. You can tell I'm Gen X, can't you? You want to rewind the tape here and listen to that again. Essentially, you affirm what someone's trying to feel without necessarily trying to fix it. Okay? And you ask the client what kind of support they need in the here and now. And depending on the type of support the client identifies, that'll tell you a lot about whether or not you need to refer out. If the client responds to what you've said by shutting down somatically, crying so hard they can't breathe, okay? Yeah, that's a sign. Maybe, no, I'm being a little sarcastic here. It's kind of obvious that's a sign that it's time to make sure that you are referring out. And having a trusted therapist referral list is part of being a responsible coach. One of the things that we do in the CLCC program is we actually have an entire module where we walk our trainees through how to navigate these conversations, what to say if you need to refer out, and we pull together a conglomerate list of all the different ways or rather all the different resources that are available out there. And so we actually have everybody looking for what are the resources in my area, who are the therapists who are willing to be a referral, who are the therapists who work with telehealth, crisis intervention, what are the groups, local groups, statewide groups, et cetera, that provide crisis intervention, things like that. Okay. So now let's get into how do you stay in integrity around this? How do you set the situation up so that a client that's coming to you is most likely to be clear on what coaching is and what it isn't? Well, first thing, name the scope of coaching in your coaching agreement. Go ahead and just on your agreement define what coaching is or isn't. Or have something on your website that defines what coaching is or isn't. You know, like right before somebody fills out the form to have a session with you, or on your booking page, define what coaching is and what it isn't. Second, have resources for yourself for supervision or mentoring. So experienced coaches like me who have been around for 20 years, who can tell you like, hey, there's an ethical line here, or therapists. You also, speaking of supervision or mentoring, want to have a bench of referral partners, therapists, doctors, programs, other professionals. You need to know what your handoff points are. Last, you need to really know how to get rooted into trusting the process of your coaching presence. You cannot prevent a client from needing a more escalated intervention than coaching provides, okay? Like you can't control that. There's no way to set this up so that that never happens, all right? I will say in 20 years of coaching, it has been very, very rare that I have found a situation where a client really needed a referral and it was just like so clear, like no, this person needs a referral. So I think coaches often are more afraid of that happening than it actually happens in practice. But I don't know. All I do know is that if it does happen, the last thing a client needs is a coach panicking. What a client needs is a coach who can meet the moment and go, okay, a lot's coming up right now. Let's breathe with it. Let's determine what it is that this client needs. You don't have to solve everything, but you do need to stay in your lane while supporting the client in an inquiry around what type of lane they might need to be in. So those are the big things for staying in integrity. Name what coaching is, define it, get supervision or mentoring so that if you feel unsure, you have someone you can talk to. This is part of why the ICF requires mentor coaching sessions, which, by the way, yes, CLCC also provides mentor coaching. Have referral partners, people you can refer out to, and then ground into your coaching presence so that you, when those moments happen, if they happen, you can trust the process and you know how to stay grounded. Ethical coaching, it's not about being perfect. It's about being aware. It's about checking your ego at the door, staying curious, and choosing integrity over performance. So the next time a session gets intense, the next time a client says to you something like, can you just tell me what to do? Take a breath, come back to your center, come back to your coaching presence. You have the skills as a coach to walk with them, not ahead of them, not behind them, but with them. That is the presence that you keep coming back to. And that is the presence that's going to ultimately support your client. All right, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Before you go, would you help us out and take a moment to give us a rating in iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening? It really helps us get the word out to other listeners. And before you go today, would you like free resources to support your coaching journey? Whether you're considering becoming a coach or you want advanced coach skills training, access our coaching resource library at teamclcc.com. Again, that's teamclcc.com. Can't wait to connect with you. And again, thanks for listening.